All right, guys, so for today, we're looking at kind of the four, it's not really methods of factoring, but kind of like how we were able to kind of sort and organize our info for all the different ways of factoring. Because our quiz is tomorrow, and it's got the hodgepodge of all of these factoring kind of all thrown together. So we're kind of breaking this down by the different types of factoring we have. First thing that we have is anything that's quadratic. Quadratic means x what? Squared. So if anything is an x squared, you know that's quadratic. So that's going to go right into our normal way of factoring, right? Pull out a GCF, you have your two sets of parentheses, options for A, options for C, you kind of play around with it, get it to work. It's kind of factoring what we're used to. You also have quartics, but they act like quadratics, right? Because you have an x to the fourth. So instead of x and x, it's going to be x squared, x squared. Okay, so quartic, what's that mean? X to the fourth. So they act like this, but instead of x and x, you have an x squared and x squared. Okay, then you have factor by grouping. This is really easy to recognize, right? Four terms, yeah, when you have four terms. Take out your GCF first, group the first two, group the last two, factor out the GCFs, set them equal to 0, and solve, right? We know how to do this. And then sum and difference of cubes. How easy is it to recognize these? Yeah, they're going to have an x to the third. How many terms will these have? 2 terms. Okay, and there's just kind of how we set that up again, same idea. All right, so we have to kind of recognize the different types of factoring. So let's get a little practice, kind of sorting where they go and reviewing each kind of type there. Now, one thing I want to stress to you is before you think you know which pattern it fits into, what should you do first? GCF. Always take a GCF out first, because sometimes you're looking at it and you're like, oh yeah, there's an x to the fourth. It's got to be the quartic one, right? What if you can take out a GCF? It may not be a quartic anymore, right? So make sure you're taking out that GCF first. Also, what should we set them equal to even before I take out a GCF? Just set them equal to 0. Okay, so let's take a look at the bottom here. We have different problems. There's 4 problems listed on your page. Let's set them equal to 0 first and take out a GCF first, and then see if we can figure out where they actually fit. Okay, so on this first one, what do I do first? Move the 5. So we'll have 25x to the fourth. When I move the 5, I get minus 9. Is there a GCF? No. So which one does this fit in? Is it quadratic? Is it quartic? Is it the cubes? It is quartic, because it's got an x to the fourth. All right, so quartic, I'm going to have to shift my board here. But we're going to move this one over into the quartic. All right, so that's where that one goes. We'll go back and finish it in a minute. Let's just see if we can practice kind of sorting them first. So the next one, what would you do to this one first? Greatest common factor of 2. So what's left when you take out a 2? 27x to the third, that's it? And minus 1? Good. Before I finish trying to factor, I have to recognize what type it is. I took out my GCF. These are now perfect cubes, right? You got a cube here, 2 terms. So this one's going to go in your sum and difference of cubes. So let's go ahead and move that one over there. And again, we'll finish them in a minute. All right, next one. What do you want to do here first? Well, subtract the 28. So 3x to the fourth minus 5x cubed minus 28x squared equals 0. Is this one quartic? Because there's an x to the fourth? What do you mean it's quadratic? Take that GCF out first. Absolutely. So if I take out an x squared, we have 3x squared minus 5x minus 28. Yeah, so if you first saw the problem, you're like, oh yeah, that one's quartic, so there's an x to the fourth. No, it's not, because you take out your GCF and now it's x squared. So this one, I can move all this at once here, should go up into your quadratic category. And by default, we know where this one goes, but what would you do to that one first? Yeah, move everything over. So 2x cubed plus x squared minus 18x minus 9 equals 0. And we can recognize that that one has 4 terms, so it's got to be the one that's grouping. All right, can we finish them now? Yeah? So let's come back up to quadratic. How do I attack quadratic ones? How do I finish? What's my next? Yeah, we're set up our parentheses. We can finish factoring. What are your signs? Good. 1x and 3. You want them in that order? Sure. We don't know, right? 1x and 3x. Ooh, options for C. 1 and 28. 2 and 14. 4 and 7. Which one do you think? Seven and 4 in that order? In that order? Hey, look, there's another one. There's Sean. All right, 4 and 7. So if we check, we get 12x minus 7x. Thank you. We got to switch the signs? Yeah, because we want that to be negative. All right, so now it's factored. This is old school, right? We've been doing this for a long time. Okay, and then when we go to solve, x equals 0, 0, 4. Perfect. Did we know that we would have 4 answers? Yeah, and again, do that little mental check when you're looking at it. I know it has an x to the 4th, so I should have 4 answers. Marcus, you with me? All right, so the quartic with a quadratic pattern over there, it's because we have an x to the 4th. So how does this one factor? It's only 2 terms. Good. 5x squared plus 3, 5x squared minus 3. It acts like a difference of squares, right, where we take the square root of each one. But when I go to solve, can I do this one mentally in my head very easily? No, it's got that darn squared on it. Not easily. Some of you probably can, but we'll write it down. So we set each one equal to 0. And then we have to solve. So we get 5x squared equals negative 3. Divide by 5. So x squared equals negative 3/5. Then we have to take the square root, top, bottom. I'm going to run out of space. So then what? So x equals plus or minus. What's going to happen to that negative? It's going to give you an I. Radical 15 over 5. Good. Okay, on the other one, add 3. So 5x squared equals 3. Divide by 5. X squared equals 3/5. Square root. So x equals plus or minus what? Good. So one has an I, one does not. Do you have 4 answers though? Yeah. Okay, factor by grouping. How do you attack that one? Good. We group the first 2. Group the last 2. GCF in the first set. What's left when I take out an x squared? 2x plus 1. Good. GCF in the second set? Just 9? Negative 9. Good. What's left? Plus 1. Common parenthesis? Leftover? Good. Set each one equal to 0 and solve. Good. Negative 1/2. And then x squared minus 9 equals 0. X squared equals 9. Is there an I? No. Plus or minus 3. Yeah, because when you move that to the other side, it becomes positive before you take the square root of it. And then the last one, sum and difference of cubes. How do you fill in your signs? So, same. Good. Cubed root of 27x cubed. It's 3x. Cubed root of 1. Square, multiply, square. So what's 3x squared? 9x squared. What's 3x times 1? 1 squared. So there it is factored. Baby brother, give me an answer. Nope. So x equals 1/3. How do you solve this one? Quadratic formulas. X equals negative b, negative 3, plus or minus 3i radical 3, all over 2a, 18. Divide them all by 3. So negative 1, I radical 3, all over 6. And again, you can do the full quadratic formula. You'll be all right. It'll just take you a little longer, but you'll still get there. All right. I know we just did like one of each type. How are we feeling? Doing okay? All right, so what we're going to do today is you guys get some practice on sorting them into the right spots and then practice solving them. Okay? So I'm going to give you something that looks something similar to this. I'll show it to you in just a minute here. All right, on the pages that I gave you guys, you have the first page has the problems that you're going to be factoring and solving. And then if you look to the next pages, you can actually pull that top page right off. It kind of breaks it up into the 4 ways. You have quadratic, you have quartic, but the quadratic pattern, factor by grouping, and the sum and difference of cubes. The same way we just kind of split down in those problems that we just looked at. Now, before you cut these apart, because you're going to take scissors, you're going to cut apart these problems, and you're going to paste them down on the correct page, whatever section they fit in. Okay? Before you do that, what should you do with all of these problems? I wouldn't solve them yet. Set them equal to 0 and take out your GCF. Because just for example, if I look up here, if I look at this problem, you might be like, oh, look, it's an x to the 4th. That one's quartic. But is it? It's not quartic. So if you take out, if I set this one equal to 0, minus 81x squared, take out my GCF of an x squared, I'm left with x squared minus 81. That's not quartic. That's quadratic. Okay, right? I took out my GCF, it's an x squared. So first thing I want you to do is go through all of these problems, make sure they're written in standard form, take out your GCF, see where you're at. Then you can cut them apart and put them on the right page and actually work through and solve them. Okay, questions? While you are working through putting them in the right order, set them equal to 0, GCF, all of that, I'll pass out scissors and glue for you guys. Okay, then you'll paste them down on the right page, actually go through, factor them, solve them, and get your answers. Okay? So this, if you finish during class, go ahead and turn it in. Your homework tonight is your quiz review, so I'll pass that out also. That way, as soon as you're done, you can just kind of move into the next thing and get started on that. Okay.